Thank you, Stan. I'm just wondering, how will history judge this extraordinary week?
Good question. Good question, because it has been an extraordinary week. And Olga, for you as a Ukrainian, watching what's happening, having friends and family there, what's going through your mind?
Thank you, Stan, and thank you, Christina, for your question. I am not a historian, but as a Ukrainian, I can remember instances in history when Ukraine was being exterminated, when Ukraine was under attack, and we can go back to the 1933 and 32. We can go back to when Putin first started the war in 2014. And so right now, I am also thinking that this is a very pivotal moment. We are living through the 8th day of the occupation of Ukraine by Russia, of a full-scale occupation. And it is extremely hard for me as a Ukrainian to witness my country being destroyed from afar. And so right now we see a lot, we see that Putin is bombing civilians, we see that he's committing war crimes, we see that he is bombing universities, hospitals, and this is just devastating. This is really concerning, and I guess my question when I'm watching it all from here in Australia is, when will it stop? You know, when will be that point when something will be done? So we see the world supporting Ukraine as much as they can, but also historically we know that sometimes this support wasn't enough, and sometimes this support didn't come in time. And so I guess this is a broader question about the value of human lives that are being lost right now in Ukraine, and what do we as the society value in, you know, when will we think that this is enough and what can be done?
And certainly a lot of that we're going to be unpacking throughout the program. A lot of questions go to that. Dennis Richardson, when you look at this, and with your long history and of course your long involvement in issues such as this, what does it speak to you in terms of what we are seeing playing out and how it will be defining this era or be remembered?
Well, I think in terms of the past week, we're witnessing one of the great watersheds in Europe. We had the two great wars of the last century. We had the Cold War, followed by the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union in the late 80s, early 90s. This is the next great watershed in Europe on from there. Now, what that means in terms of history, we'll have to wait and see. But Putin has made a big strategic play. I think he may not have expected the NATO countries to be as unified as what they are. They clearly plan their sanctions carefully. They'll take a long while to bite. But you asked in your opening introduction, Stan, why are they standing alone? Well, overnight, 135 member countries of the 193 members of the United Nations voted outright to condemn Russia for its invasion. 35 countries abstained, and 4 countries voted with Russia: North Korea, Syria, Eritrea, and next door to Russia, Belarus. Now, if your four friends in the world are Belarus, North Korea, Syria, and Eritrea, you've got a problem.
Deborah Snow, former Moscow correspondent, to watch all of this play out, what does it say to you about this moment?
Well, I agree with Dennis. It's a massive watershed moment. One doesn't like to think about worst-case scenarios, but already we've had talk out of the Kremlin about putting their nuclear forces on some kind of alert. One hopes that's bluff. There has to be. I desperately hope that behind the scenes of what's going on with the UN and the European Parliament and so on, that back channels are still open. I hope for Europe's sake, for the world's sake, also for Ukraine's sake and for Russia's sake, that back channels are still open somewhere. Because if this keeps going, you know, towards increasingly grave scenarios, then it's a very perilous moment, not just for Europe but for the world.
Jason Falinski.
Well, Stan, I agree with everyone on the panel. I think what this is really about is, and it may turn out to be a hinge moment in history, because for the last 7 decades we've had a global world order based on the rule of law. What is happening at the moment is you have authoritarian regimes, both in Russia and elsewhere, pushing that law to the side and trying to assert that if you have the military capability, then you are able to assert yourself over smaller and less powerful neighbours. If we are to maintain Western order and a sense of an international order based on law, this has to be the moment when the West stands up and assertively pushes back on an aggressor. Because we saw in Crimea, we've seen in Syria and in other places that when we don't, it simply escalates to the next moment. And I think in our region, we have authoritarian players who will be looking at this, not in the short term, but in the medium to long term, about determining whether the West has the will to continue to maintain an international order based on law.
Christina, I want to come back to you in just a moment because, of course, you're involved with the Ukraine community here. But I'll just get a comment from you, Brendan, before I do, and flip that a little bit, picking up on what Jason has said. What it says about Russia this week, but what it says about the West and the ability to meet an authoritarian threat. What do you take away from this week?
Well, I think, look, it's been a tragic week, and history will judge this week. As Dennis said, as a watershed. However, we don't know how this is going to unfold. And an optimistic view is that because of the scale of the response of condemnation by the European Union, the United States, Canada, Australia and other countries, I think that at least, let's hope, will mean that President Putin will be rethinking his position. And as has been said, we would hope that there would be some lines of communication open still. And it's one of the reasons we haven't, for example, dismissed the ambassador of Russia, because however odious it might seem, ongoing communication with the Russian state may be our best hope in preventing the escalation. But in escalation of this matter, now it's hard to say to Ukrainians it could get worse than this, but frankly it could get worse than this, and therefore every effort has to be made to prevent that from happening, and hopefully there'll be some cessation of conduct by Russia towards Ukraine.
Christina, you are the executive of the Australian Federation of Ukrainian Organisations, so yes. I want to ask you about that and how the community is feeling and how they're coming together. Olga said how difficult it is to watch on. What's it been like for you? This
last 7 days have been extraordinary, Stan. Leading up to it, there was a lot of discussion, will it be tomorrow? As Australian Ukrainians, we're living it from afar, as Olga said, but for our family and friends that are living in Ukraine, they were living on the edge and living, going to school, going to work, kids going out and playing in the playgrounds, planning their holidays, and literally at 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoon our time, I picked up the phone and rang friends and family and said, 2 words, Stan, it started. I woke friends and family and said, it started. And you could hear them waking, and it was very emotional. How's the Ukrainian community come together? We're a nation of fighters, as you're seeing what's happening on the ground at the moment. 40 million people over there are doing all that they can. Initially when this war started, because of course the war's been going for 8 years, when this invasion started, they showed a lot on television of the mass exodus of people, the cars leaving. But a hell of a lot of people are still there, and they're fighting because they are determined that they will not give up that soil, they will not give up that land that is theirs. It is not Russian, it is Ukrainian. So how are we pulling together? We've had rallies, we're pulling together with the government. The government, both sides of government have been absolutely amazing. I've been in wonderful meetings with both sides. The support has been tremendous, but we always have to say, please do more. Ukraine is fighting this on its own. Yes, now they're being weaponed up. Now there is being support. But with my involvement, Stan, I know, and you hear, has Red Cross arrived? We're hearing these questions every single day. Who else is there? Who is helping? I got a phone call today from a friend of a friend, and they said, we have family that are underneath an apartment in the basement, and there's shooting going all around, Stan. And they have no food and water, women. How can you help me? And I said, how can I help from Australia? How can I help these women get food and water in a basement of an apartment building just outside of Kyiv?